The year is 2680 before the Common Era. A man is sipping a cup of wine while sitting under a shady pergola. He's admiring his own vineyard that extends to the great river Nile. Tens of workers were stomping grapes, while others were stirring the precious ruby liquid in big jars. Near the vineyard, there was the man's huge palace. From afar, the sound of kids loudly playing could be heard. As the man had another sip of wine, he smiled as a memory surfaced from his youth, when he was just another commoner in the land of the great river. My name is Sarah. Welcome to the land of opportunities, Bronze Age Egypt. The man's name was Medjen. We know his story thanks to the inscription in his tomb at Saqqara, the royal necropolis in ancient Egypt. Medjen was born in the delta of the Nile, and his mother Nebsenet was a priestess, while his father Impuemank was a judge and a scribe. His family can be considered middle class in our modern terms. In fact, his mother owned about 30 acres of farming land, and the family lived in a comfortable house with maybe a couple of servants too. Medjen was spared from hard labor, but he could not be considered idle rich. He had to work for a living. Medjen was meant to follow his father in his job, so as a kid, he learned how to write and read, becoming a scribe too. Literate people in ancient Egypt were a tiny minority, probably less than 1% of the population. But this didn't mean that Medjen was part of a decision-making elite. He was just a tiny gear in a complex administrative machine. His first job was as an accountant at a storehouse, a privileged position compared to those toiling in the fields, although a rather modest job. Soon, he showed a knack for accounting, and he gained the attention of his superiors. The governor of Kasse hired him for a precious job, being the local field judge. Medjen had to measure and mark field boundaries, a very important task in the agricultural society he lived in. Medjen was clearly a man of many talents. He soon gained renown as a field judge, so he was promoted to judge of all land disputes. Just a century before, a man like him could be quite satisfied with his brilliant career, but something had clearly changed in ancient Egypt. The kingdom was created more than 4 centuries before by King Narmer, who managed to unify what was once a patchwork of small kingdoms. They were nothing more than small city-states with farming villages all around them. A political system like this one could be managed by the king and his own family. Blood ties ensured loyalty, and people outside his elite were generally excluded from the decision-making process. But with the political system increasing in size, more management was required. Simply put, the king had not enough cousins. Ruling over the country was no more the business of the royal family alone, but there was still a kind of hierarchy. Outsiders had low-level jobs, such as being a scribe. By Medjen's time, the Egyptian economic and political systems had become quite complex. Not only did the king need many officials, but many of them had to be quite specialized. It was simply impossible to keep the halls of power close to commoners. This was the era of King Zoser, the builder of the first pyramid. Building such a gargantuan tomb required incredible resources that only a fine-tuned management system could provide. So Medjen could now aspire to another promotion. He took his first state-level post, the management of the national harvest of flax, a plant that's used to make linen, a strategic resource for the kingdom. He was good at his job, and the king personally acquired his talents. One by one, he was given 5 regions to manage. and the modest son of a judge and a priestess was by now a true lord. At one point, a good chunk of his native delta of the Nile was under Medjen's control. But that's not all. The king put under his management the Kau stronghold, a key fortress in the western desert, making him one of the most influential administrators in the whole kingdom. This led Medjen to be named Master of the Hunt and Desert Governor by the king as well. These were ever-growing responsibilities at the highest level possible. But there was even more. The highest point of his career was becoming ruler of the palace towns of the Southern Lake, meaning the administrator for the royal palaces on Fayum Lake. This means that Medjen was personally entrusted by the king with managing the pleasure palaces of the royal house. This prestigious career made Medjen not only respected, but extremely wealthy too. For his service and loyalty, he was rewarded by the king with an extensive estate that generated a passive income. This was intended to support his funerary cult forever, granting him a better afterlife. Alongside his estate, a palace was given to him. It was 11,000 square meters large, about 117,000 square feet. All around the palace, there were grapes, fig trees, and an extensive walled vineyard too. The palace walls were finely decorated, and it had a large pool too. Ah, my dear Medjen, you really did live large. In the end, Medjen, the son of a modest judge and a priestess, lived in this great palace for the rest of his days, enjoying the luxuries that were the reward of his talent and not his birthright.